Hi, in this short video I'm going to show you how to create pivot tables in Excel. I'm actually using Excel 2010, but what I'm going to be showing is the same for 2007 as well. Now, pivot tables are a good way in which to analyse information, data that's set out in a table format or a list format in Excel. Here what I've got is some data, some example data I'm going to use. It's supposed to be sales of used cars. If I just go to the top, you see Honest Ted's used car sales. So it's 1 quarter sales for Honest Ted's used car sales. And the data, and this is most important, the data is laid out in a solid block. You can see here there are no blank rows, no blank columns. If I scroll down and scroll across, so you can see it's a solid block of data, and at the top here in row 4, it doesn't have to be row 4, but it has to be the first row of the block of data, we've got field names. These are words that sum up what's in that column. So for example, if I scroll back, we've got a field called month, and everything in that column is to do with the month that particular car's been sold. Here we've got a column with the which salesperson made the sale. Here we've got the make of the car sold, the model of the car sold, what type of car it was, what colour it was, what year the car was, how many years old that car was, what price it was sold for, age grouping, this is the age of the person who bought it, and we've got a payment method field here, and we've got either credit card, cash, bank card, personal check, depending on how the person paid, and then here we've got the region of the company that sold the car. Now, what's most important if you're going to create a pivot table from a set of data like this is that you've got some fields that have got the same data in more than one record. What I mean by that is here, look, got January, 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 and then we've got another load with February, February, February. Here we've got Mary O'Dwyer, Mary O'Dwyer, Mary O'Dwyer, Mary O'Dwyer. So the same information is repeated in that field. Because one of the things that you do with a pivot table is you group information together. The whole idea of a pivot table really is to summarize large amounts of data and make it more understandable, and part of that is grouping the data. So on this particular example sheet, there's lots of fields that I can do that on. Basically I could group it on type, look, sedan, 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 sedan. On colour, there's more than one car with the same colour. We could group it on year. We could group it on the age grouping of the person who bought it. We could group it on what the payment method was. We could group it on region. So you need fields which you can group by. It also helps if you've got a field with some numeric data in as well. Here I've got the price field, and it's the price of each car, that the price each car was sold for. Although you don't necessarily need that, but it's quite useful, and I'll show you why in a second. Okay, so to create the pivot table, you just need to make sure that your cursor, this cell pointer rather, in Excel, is somewhere in the block of data. So it wouldn't work if the cell pointer was out here, will work if the cell pointer is inside that block of data. I should mention as well that there's no significance to the fact that the field names at the top here are in a different colour. Doesn't matter. They don't need to be this. They can be the same font, the same colour. Right. So cell pointer somewhere in that block of data. Then to create the pivot table, you go to the Insert tab here, and on the left-hand side we've got Pivot Table. This is the same for Excel 2010 as it is for 2007, and you just choose Pivot Table. It'll then bring up a little dialog box, which generally you can just click OK to. It sort of guesses correctly. Basically, you can see there's a dotted line around the block of data, so it's guessed what's the data you're going to use to create the pivot table from. and it's done that because the cell pointer was in a solid block of data. And then down here, choose where you want the pivot table report to be placed, and new worksheet is generally better. Basically, it's going to create another tab down here and put the pivot table on that. So I'm just going to not change anything there, just click on OK. So we've now got two tabs. Look, the data sheet where all the data is, and something called sheet 3. We could right click on that if you wanted to and rename it, and I'm going to call it pivot example. You don't need to rename it, but just to show that you can rename these tabs. Okay, now over on the right hand side we've got a list of all the field names: number, month, salesperson, make, model. If we go back to look at the data, look, it's taken that information from the fields at the top: number, month, salesperson, make, model, etc. And then down here we've got 4 boxes. In column labels and row labels, we're going to drag and drop into there fields that you can group by. There's also another field here that you can group by, report filter, which I'll come back to, but column labels and row labels, fields that you can group by, need to go into there. Then into this box, values, you can either drop a numeric field, like price. We've got a field called price we could drop into there, or you can drop into it fields that contain text as well, and we'll have a look at that in a second. And it does the calculation based on what you drop down here. So let's have a go at doing something then. Let's have a go at, if I get the make field, drag that and drop it into row labels, you can see what it does in alphabetical order. It puts the words that appear in that make field. If you go and look back at the data, look, under make you've got Toyota, BMW, Toyota, Ford, Hyundai, Ford, etc. So what it does, it lists all the pieces of information that are unique in that particular field, and it puts them in alphabetical order. You can put also things in the column labels, in which case it would put labels across the top in the columns. But I'm going to put into rows, and then what I can do is I can get the price field and drop it into the values box. And what it's done is it's doing a calculation. It's adding up. Just go back to the data sheet and come across to price. Basically, it's adding up this information that's in this column for each of the makes. So 220,639 is the sum of the prices for all the BMW cars. What you can do if you want to, you can make it look a bit more easy to read. You can select across the area with the numbers, and as usual you can use these formatting buttons to make the numbers look slightly different. So I'm going to format them as currency and then just make that column a bit wider so you can see it. So that's the sum of the prices of all the BMW cars that's been sold. You can, if you want to put these into other orders, you can also sort them as well. So I put the cell pointer in sum of price and then sort from smallest to largest, and then we go, instead of being sorted by the row labels as it was before, it's sorted by the size of the sum of the price. So we can see there that BMWs sold the most, Hyundai's sold the least, or at least made the least money. If we actually wanted to see how many cars that was, what you can do is here where it says sum of price, if I right click on that and go down to value field settings, click on that, I can change the calculation that's being done. Now by default number fields get summed, added up, but if instead I say I'd like to count it and then click on OK, then again if I select those numbers and take off the pound sign and reduce the number of decimal places, again by using the formatting, it's now counting up how many cars that actually constitute. So we not only made the most from BMWs, we actually sold the most cars as well. There was 20 cars from BMW, but only 2 Hyundai cars. So that by right clicking on the heading here, count of price, go to value field settings, you can choose what the calculation is. I can choose average look, and again I might want to format that back as currency again. That's the average price of the item that was sold. Now that's quite interesting, because the average price of the car sold was £17,000 for Hyundai, but only £11,000 for the BMWs. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reselect that. I'm going to actually, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back, value field settings. I'm going to go back to count. So I've got, I'm just counting up how many of the cars were sold. So going back over here, so we can see how many were sold by each make. And what we can do now is we can cross-reference this by dragging into this box, the column labels, another field that you can group by. So let's have a look. Actually, what I'll do, I'll use salesperson. So I'm going to put salesperson in there. There's 3 salespeople. And so here we can see how many cars were sold by each of the salespeople and what sort of cars those were. So we can see that Hector Smith and Mary O'Dwyer both sold 40 cars in that quarter, and Justin O'Callaghan is lagging behind with 22 cars. And then you can see here we can break down exactly how many of each type of car each person sold. Then there's a grand total here. All 3 people sold this many cars altogether. I'm just going to drag that salesperson field off, and instead I'm going to drag in the age grouping. This is the, if you remember, this is the age grouping of the purchases. So what we can see here is that the biggest purchasers of cars were the 25-year-olds or less. We sold 30 cars to them. We only sold 11 cars to those people 55 or over. And also what we can see from here is that the cars we sold to the over 55s were Mitsubishi, Kia, Volkswagen, Ford, Toyota and BMW. We didn't sell any Hyundais, Peugeots, GMHs, and Renaults or Nissans to over 55s. This data is just dummy data, just made up as well. It doesn't actually have any reality to it. I should think you sell quite a few more Nissans to over 55s in real life. Okay, so the other thing that you can do is you can also put a field in this report filter. So for example, if I drag the salesperson field into report filter, nothing changes over here, look, but we've now got an extra thing at the top, and I can pull this little menu down. At the moment it's showing the information for all the sales. If I pull this down and say select multiple items, I can say, well, I'd like to just look at Justin Callahan's sales, and click on OK. So now what I'm doing is I'm filtering it to show just the sales for Justin Callahan, and these are his sales. I could filter it again and say, let's look at Mary O'Dwyer's. So I'm looking at her sales. I could filter it again. I could look at Hector Smith's, like that. Or I could look at, again, all of the sales, and it brings it back like that. Other things you can do with, that's more or less what you can do with pivot tables. Other things that you could look at as well is you can pull more than one field into the same box down here. So if I move age grouping and I put it down into a row label, it shows the same information but in a different format. So it's grouping all the Hyundais together, all the Peugeots together, all the GMHs together, etc. But it's not cross-referencing it. I can pull that back. So you can just experiment really, just pulling these fields into the various boxes to see the results. One last thing I'll show you before we finish is you can also create charts as well. What I'm going to do here, I think, is I'm going to take off the age grouping. So I've just got a very simple table now showing how many of each car was sold. Make sure the cell point is somewhere in that box. And if you come up here to pivot table tools, where you've got sorting and stuff like this, and under design where you can actually change what the table looks like by just clicking here. You can see it just changes the colours. What we've got is a pivot chart. Now if I click on pivot chart, it'll say, well, what sort of chart do you want? If you've used Excel charts before, this will be familiar. There's loads of different chart types. I'm just going to leave it on the basic clustered column chart and click on OK. Then you can see here it's actually created a chart automatically from the data up here. Alright, that's the end, I think, so thanks very much for listening.